The Olympic Fast Track program is a key initiative crucial to Oz cycling team's Olympic gold medal strategy, and our next guest, Lynne Munro, is leading the way for our athletes to reach their Olympic dreams. Well, hi Lynne, and thanks so much for joining us today. We're here for International Women's Day, and the theme this year is Choose to Challenge. And I think that the work that you're doing over at Oz Cycling in the high performance program is exactly that. So can you tell us a little bit about the program and the work you're doing with our track cycling athletes?
Yeah, so I head up a program called the Olympic Fast Track program. We initiated it in response to kind of low numbers in our female track sprint pathway. Steph Morton was one of two Olympians going to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and decided to retire, not heading to 2021. So we're now left with Carly McCulloch as our remaining athlete at that level. And we have one other athlete in the national program in our academy squad. And that's it in the national program. And then lower down the pathway, dwindling numbers still. So it was a really kind of proactive response to that and saying, right, well, we obviously through Australia, we're very high performing in sprint and we challenge for gold when we go to Olympics. So 2024 was looking like a hard challenge for us and we needed to initiate something very different. So I head up a program where we're looking for exceptional athletes from essentially other sports, other training backgrounds, people that we know have that capability within 3 years of an Olympic, seeking them out and then, really trying to use innovative practices to get them on the line vying for gold in 2024. So it's a really unique challenge. And as you said, I think the interesting thing for me is we've got to try and really maximize the opportunity in working with women. We've got to design an environment and use very purposeful training that gets them there quickly. And so that's very much understanding who we are as women uniquely, the coaching practices, the training practices, and the dynamics of the environment. So there's a big learning piece in this for us. We recognize that, we're still on the back foot for women in sport, really. And so for me, having the opportunity to head this program and say, right, we've got to do something real special to get there. And it has to start with getting the environment and getting the coaching right. So it's a really unique opportunity. And I think the sort of second part of the opportunity is to leave a legacy. We want to obviously make sure that we've got a flourishing pathway for the future, and also that we understand what we're doing with women and really making something that's special for stepping forward in the women's arena. So yeah, exciting project.
Well, one of the words I keep picking up is unique. I mean, is there a uniqueness in coaching females versus males? Because it's quite a female targeted and specific program that you're running.
Yeah, look, I think that's the opportunity to understand. If we look at the sort of research and the practices that have got us to where we are in high performance sport right now, it's largely driven by men. We're only just coming into the arena effectively as women. And so we look at all the kind of evidence-based practices we talk about. They're largely designed on men. So I think we've got to understand that. And I think it's too early to kind of go, oh, yeah, well, we're definitely different here and there. I think what we can say is that we've got to enhance that sense of there being diversity and it being something that we want to harness those advantages of being different. So there's a bit of exploring involved, and that's something that we're picking up the mantle for in this program and really hoping to lead the way to understand what those differences are and use them to our advantage. I think most coaches would say that when they work with women, they recognize there are some dynamics that are different. There's some focus and some ways that we interact very differently. There's language potentially that we use, the way we interact with our peers and the relationships that we build are different. So if we're not understanding that and if we're not actually looking into how does that impact the environment that we need to create for them, then we're missing a trick. And we're not also looking after those athletes and supporting them flourishing and being all who they are. So that's the opportunity that we have here is to learn that. And we've made some good inroads into understanding that. And from there, again, that's part of that legacy piece is once we have some other information, is we start then using that and educating some of the coaching staff that are out there in the pathway and trying to drop that down into the environments lower down and really make a difference in this space for women.
Well, it's pretty good news for the athlete development, especially the young ladies wanting to, emulate Anna Meares or Carly McCulloch and win their Olympic gold medal. But what about from the coaching side? Because you're a minority insofar as, Lynne, you are actually the only female coach within the Oz cycling system in high performance, which is remarkable. And even on a global level, you're a bit of an anomaly, the job that you're doing. How did you set out on this path to reach where you are with the coaching?
Yeah, look, I never at any point until I kind of got to here in this high performance arena recognized that, oh, there's a difference in me being female. I was somebody who strived hard, worked hard, had aspirations, and I actually started in the sports pathway as a strength and conditioning coach. Then I progressed on to working for Cycling New Zealand. I did my master's in sports science with the sprint program when I was there. I moved over to Britain, was working with the Scottish cycling team prior to the 2014 Commonwealth Games, and then came over back to Australia, did my PhD, and I think that was a big part for me in terms of saying, like, yeah, I've really got to find the best of who I am to get into this kind of pointy end of things. And when I came over to then work with the Australian cycling team on the back end of that PhD, I think that's when I started looking around and going, oh, hang on, there's only me here. And that was interesting. Like, it's definitely, I think we all recognize as women, I think that sense of isolation, loneliness, of the dynamics in the room are very different when you're on your own going, I'm the representation of difference here. And just not having that person at your shoulder to stand up and say, hang on, it's not just a different perspective that's about Lynne, it's actually a different perspective that's about being a woman, and there's something in how we're experiencing things here. And so that's been challenging. And as you say, I think stepping onto, doing World Cups last year was my first eye-opener of, again, looking around and going, oh, well, I'm the only female on the line here. So I didn't recognize it in myself until you start looking around, seeing it's only you, and seeing how those dynamics are challenging. And they are. I was on a course with the AIS this year for female high performance coaches, and they introduced me to a term called second generational gender bias. And suddenly I started hearing back to myself all the dynamics I was experiencing. And the second generational aspect is basically saying, first generational is this explicit stuff. It's the real stuff that nobody would tolerate. But the second generational stuff is saying, it's like, all the guys here absolutely support and respect me. But there's things in those dynamics that are maybe not quite working for me. There's a perspective that I'm bringing to the table that's maybe not being heard, or it's producing that sense of it's a little bit challenging, like she's seeing things a different way, or working with the athletes maybe in a slightly different way. And so that's the bit, again, where you look over your shoulder and say, well, hang on, this is actually hard. And there's that additional weight when you go into what's already a very tough arena in high performance sport. You've got this weight of actually having to go, well, I've got to carry myself extra here. I've got to have a voice. I've got to push for change. I've got to be the flag waver. And that was never something in my life that I thought I was going to have to be. But you then have to pick up that mantle. And now I think, having gained that confidence of having worked in this environment for a few years, I've now started to recognize the value in my uniqueness. And really harness that and be able to kind of push for change. As you said, the topic of this meeting and interview today, like challenging for change, is like there's something there where I have to be that role model. I want to be that role model. And I carry it forward now with pride, where maybe a few years ago I didn't quite have that confidence. And so it's taken a while for me to get to the point where I have that courage to speak and say, hey, we've got to do things a little bit differently here. We've got to open our eyes and try and move things forward for women.
Oh, the way you put it is just so perfect, Lynne, and I think that Oz Cycling is really lucky to have you in the system, and also the path that you're forging is the one that the generations to come will get to easily walk. So thank you for the work that you're doing in that space. I have to ask, do you have any advice for the budding coaches of the future who are umming and ahhing about what it may involve and what their place may be for any of the young ladies?
Yeah, look, I've actually, one of the roles that I take on is trying to mentor, so that I have some specific women and girls that I'm working with in the pathway now as performance support staff as well as coaches. And I also do a lot of talking to things like unis where there's, they have employment evenings and things like that, because I think there are some big messages there. It's not easy being isolated at points or being in a minority at points, but I think if you're armed with that understanding, it doesn't catch you by surprise. So for me, there was a sense of like, just looking around the room and going, oh, okay, hang on, am I experiencing this? And having that self-doubt. So I think that when you can put that out to people and say, look, you are going to experience some challenges, but you're then aware of that, and then it's about having a really good team around you. I really had a fantastic session listening to Judy Murray, who was talking, Andy Murray's coach and mum, who was talking on the AAS conference last week, who was talking about building army. And I thought that's what's wonderful. And it sounds strong and it sounds intimidating, but what she's saying is have people at your shoulder, people that you can turn to, who are you, they're going to see you, they're going to support you. So I think that's a big one, having somebody who's a mentor, who is an outlet for you and who can talk things through with you. And those two things then give you that arm and a leg of support, and you're going to need it at some points. But it also then lets you have inroads into tapping into other people that have walked before you. And coming back to my journey, that's something I think that I've struggled with. There's something nice in the pride of being the pioneer, but it also means you're the one walking through the jungle with the bushes and plants hitting you in the face. And so I think if I can clear the path a little bit, great. I'm really proud to have done that. And then giving those advices like, now, bring people with you. Join the dots between all of the women that are out there, bring people with you, and it gives you that kind of strength in numbers. So I think that's a big one. And I think the other one for me is have the courage to speak up. We are actually in a very supporting environment, and the men in this environment are, as I said before, they really respect and value me, but they're not aware. They're not aware of what I'm experiencing. Why should they be? So there's something there in terms of actually being able to openly say, do you know what would really help here? Or do you know what I'm experiencing? That's a really big one, is just having the confidence to say, look, I am actually experiencing some hard stuff because... And actually then bringing that to the table. And I think that if you do that early, that you start to kind of empower yourself rather than sitting on the back foot and wondering. For me, it tapped a lot into confidence, and you're sort of going, oh, I don't know, am I experiencing this? Is it me? Is it the room? And so I think if I could leave a message with people, is don't let anything impact that confidence, because you're going to need it. And there's no reason to have it impacted either if you have that support and if you have those conversations.
Well, that's pretty cracking advice, Lynne. And based on the jungle analogy, I'm now picturing you in a safari suit. So we might have to get you an Oz cycling safari suit for the job. Lynne, thank you so much for joining us. And we will look on with eagerness at the progression of not only your glass ceiling breaking career, but also those of your athletes. So happy International Women's Day.
Fantastic. And look, it's wonderful to have this opportunity. And I think the more that we provide those opportunities, the more that we can empower and role model. And it's fantastic. So thank you very much for this.
Thanks, Lynne.